That was a very stressful day and long day. They were so much fun to work with together. I often have to say action and then look away because I'll start laughing. The landscape is so beautiful. We really want to make it a big part of the show. Those moments to me are the most important moments in the series.
Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome to the podcast today one of the directors of When Hope Calls, Don McBrearty. Hi, Don. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Stephanie.
So excited to chat with you about season 2 of When Hope Calls and learn about your involvement as a director in this series. I know that you directed season 1, episodes 5 and 6, and then the series is now on Great American Family, Pure Flix, and Super Channel, and you've directed this season's episodes 1 and 2. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Tell us a little bit before we dig into When Hope Calls. Can you give us a little bit of your history directing, maybe some of the big projects that we might recognize that you've been involved in?
I think the ones, I think Murdoch Mysteries shows in the U.S. quite a lot. I directed many episodes of that from the first season on. I directed on The Good Witch. Heartland, which went for many, many years.
Yes.
A movie called Terry about Terry Fox, who's a Canadian hero who, tried to run across Canada for cancer research.
Well, that's
So that
awesome.
was a passion project that was quite wonderful. A movie called Chasing Freedom with Juliette Lewis. Another called The Interrogation of Michael Crow with Ali Sheedy. I got to work with Jeff Goldblum on a Ray Bradbury series. I got to work with John Candy, the wonderful John Candy, on something called Really Weird Tales. So I've had a fairly long and actually something quite interesting. Way back, I did a short film that won an Oscar for Best Short Film back in '83 called Boys and Girls. And Megan Follows was a young 12-year-old, pretty much. I think she was 12 then. And Megan was the director that came right after me. So I worked with Megan all the way back when she was, really a child actor.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that film won an Oscar. So those are some of the things people might recognize.
Not your first rodeo, right?
No.
What an amazing career that you've had. And now we get to see the fruits of your labor here on When Hope Calls. Can you talk about what it was like to come back for the new season of When Hope Calls after being away for a few years?
First of all, it was wonderful because I really did love working on the series. It's funny because during the 2 seasons that it was kind of in limbo, I shot a couple of TV movies on the same set. I worked with Danica McKellar.
Yeah.
I've worked with her a couple of times, but we did one where we filmed actually using the facades of the town. We changed them up to make it look like we were in a European in Holland somewhere near, and we had a windmill in the background. It was called was something on Windmill Way.
You did Windmill Way. Yeah, you did Christmas Christmas on
Christmas.
Windmill Way.
Yes, exactly. And then Danica and I had worked on a couple of things together. The last one was a Cinderella Christmas Ball. It was Cinderella Christmas Ball, which we also shot on that site on where the town is. So even though we weren't doing When Hope Calls, I was on site there for a couple of years in while we were waiting for the series to get picked up again.
It's like it never left you. You got to keep it going,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
I bet it was interesting to shoot something completely different than When Hope Calls. It's amazing how I imagine you could transform it and make it look completely different.
Yes, we couldn't transform it too much. We changed paint. We put different facades up in Holland.
Yeah.
The tops of buildings were quite different. So we did, quite a bit. The art director, production designer did all the work, but we managed to make it look, quite different. And we filled in one end of the street. We digitally put a windmill way up in the background. So I don't think people would recognize what it is, but when, I'm standing there, all I'm thinking about is the
Hmm.
stuff we did on When Hope Calls.
Yeah. We'll have to go back and check out those movies and see if we can make some comparisons.
Exactly.
Can you share with us what's something as a director of When Hope Calls that people might not realize about directing this show?
We had to recast all the children from
Hmm.
the orphanage because after 2 years, at that age, they grow
They're
and
growing up. Yeah.
change very quickly. So we had to have a whole new cast of children of the orphans. And as I was directing the first episode, I got to audition the kids and give them direction. And I found I always loved that challenge. It's probably the part of directing I love the most is working with the actors.
Yeah.
And so finding the kids and trying to find kids who lived locally or as close to locally as possible so we didn't have to bring children and caretakers all the way up from Toronto, which would be costly and time consuming. So I'd say that was certainly one of the challenges. And working with animals, again, it always looked so easy. We had a young filly that played a major role when it gets lost and they're searching
Sugar.
for,
Yeah.
for the whole
Yeah.
episode. Um, they're not you can train horses over the years, but training a filly not possible. So it's challenging. And so just, having patience, work with the wrangler, and then, when the little girl, Charlotte, who's blind, is feeding it a cookie,
Yeah.
she has to look like she's not seeing what she's
Mm.
doing, and
Yeah.
yet, she's worried about her hand getting bitten, and we don't know, how the filly will. So some of those things they don't seem like they're challenging, but they are.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I
Yeah.
imagine working with animals and those children. Did Heartland and dealing with, the horses there, did that prepare you for working with animals at all?
It certainly did, but I'd never worked with a filly, a
Oh,
young
yeah.
horse that
Yeah.
and that brought its own challenges, and it was really challenging when, at towards the end of the episode when Charlotte hears and then with the Cindy Busby as character, um, when they find the filly we had to make it look like it got stuck,
In with the
with the
lead in
halter in
between
the
the tree.
tree. But it was challenging because we can't have people around it. So we worried it might run away, because again, it's not
Yeah.
trained. And so, little challenges like that you hope people don't even notice. They just buy into the story. But behind the camera, we're all, quite worried
Oh, yeah.
as to what might happen.
Well, you pulled off the lead being stuck between the tree well, so it was covered really well. So,
Good.
what's something that's different about directing this season compared to season one?
Um, I guess I've touched on it a little bit. That certainly the new orphans was, we had um, to audition, cast, and then work with six new kids, and they played, very heavily in that first episode. Um, so I think that would be one thing. And obviously introducing two wonderful new characters to replace Morgan and RJ. That was challenging, but I was so happy with both Cindy and Chris Russell. They were wonderful to work with.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say those were two of the things that stand out.
Okay. So Alfonso shared with me that he was on set for season two. How closely, as a director, do you work with Alfonso?
Uh, very closely. He puts so much work into it before, I even get the call. Um, there's so many challenges with you know, actor availability, with the age of the children, how much school they have to get during the day. So we're constantly, the board is changing and we're trying to schedule um, when Alfonso's around, I try to keep him abreast of everything that's going on. And certainly, he's always so open to, being to reach out to him if I've got any kind of question or concern. And having worked with him from season one, of course, that really, really helped as well. But I certainly use him as much as I can because I want the series to go and I want him to be abreast of everything that's going on.
That's
So I'd say,
awesome.
yeah, and especially in post, I again try to give him more input and step out a little bit. Once I finish directing mine, in terms of music, and that's one of the other questions I guess coming up. But in terms of post production and music and all of that, I try to just step back and because he sees the whole picture, he knows it from beginning to end, what the arcs are and all of that. So I I defer to him on anything I think he'll be uh, you know that'll be more helpful for him.
Got it. I imagine with it being a period piece that there's research involved. Does any of that research fall on you as a director?
Um, a little bit. I mean, the word, we were saying it was going to be a few years later than, the previous
Hmm.
seasons, and fashion had started to change a little bit. And we had, for example, the Maggie's parents who come, they're people from England, they're world travelers, so, they dress a little better and a little more differently. So that all came into play. Cindy Busby, a couple of times, she's carrying around a coffee cup, and she bumps into first of all the Chris Russell character, and then she bumps into um, oh my
Bumps into
gosh,
Sam.
bumps into Sam,
Yeah.
and both times spills on her costume. So we were trying to think, well, what kind of cup in the early
Oh, yeah.
1900s, and we realized there were paper cups, the Dixie cup, which prior to that was called something else, but it was basically there were paper cups at the time. But it took us a while to figure out, you know, were they really around and would they've had them there? In the
Hmm.
end, we decided it made more sense, and
Yeah.
but we did do the research and find out that they actually did exist.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So it's funny
Dixie's
what
been around.
little details sometimes take quite a bit of research. But
Can
in
you,
terms of costumes, yeah, we leave that up to the costume designer
okay.
to enlighten us.
Can you walk us through a typical day as a director?
A typical day for me, I'll drive in to it's about a half hour to 45-minute drive from North Bay to Powassan, where the town is, and I usually want to ride with the first AD, my the old friend Rocco Gismondi, and so we'll talk about the day in the car, what our challenges are, what our concerns are, what's happening with the weather, are we going to need to move inside? So we get, some work done then. Um, and um, and then once we're on set, usually the first thing is to try to get everybody, out of hair and makeup and wardrobe so we can actually block the scene. And that's going to be weather dependent, where the light is it cloudy, is it sunny? So, but we pretty much know we have to do the scenes in a certain order. And often we don't bring the kids in right away because they're in school. So we talk about the board and what the sequence of scenes will be. And And then once we do the blocking, often the actors are still, they've got curlers in their hair or they're in their normal dress. They'll be sent back to get ready, and then we start lighting, setting up the shots, setting up the cameras. Um, and then we bring the actors back and then we start shooting the scene. So that's
Okay.
kind of the beginning of a typical day. And then we go through that process for the rest of the day. But a big concern always is the hours of the kids,
Got it.
um, and how much of the animals we're using. The animals take a lot of time, they take time as well. So we try to be judicious as to letting them know when we're going to be ready so they can bring them on set and then give them time to get all hitched up and all of that. So a lot of things are going on that the audience won't know, but we have to plan very carefully.
Yeah. Well, and it's stuff that we love to learn about because it makes the experience of watching it so much richer. Um,
Right.
do you shoot when you directed episodes 1 and 2? Did you block shoot those to where those were shot simultaneously?
Uh, we there's we did when we had to,
Okay.
but there are different kind of union rules as to do actors get paid double when they're shooting two episodes on the same day.
Mhm.
So I can't remember how we negotiated all of that every day, but normally, we're shooting out of sequence, but not trying not to mix the episodes. But at a few times we had to. Certainly with Morgan, I guess we're segue into that.
Yeah,
Morgan was available for the first episode.
got it.
I mean, for the first week of the about a 13 and a half day. Um, um, Both episodes are shot in about 13 and a half days.
Okay.
So she was there for the first few days, and RJ wasn't available till in fact, not only the very end, but the beginning of the next episode. So I had to
Got it.
I had to go back up to North Bay to work with RJ, because we shot that stuff while Megan was shooting episodes 3 and 4.
Interesting.
So a lot of juggling around.
A lot of film magic going on to make it work, right?
Yes, exactly.
Can you talk about, you said that Megan followed you with episodes 3 and 4. What's that collaboration like among directors to kind of keep that consistency?
Um, I, I think we mostly watch previous episodes, and when I'm shooting and Megan was prepping, we'd occasionally see each other and wave, and if she had a real specific question, she would come and ask me, but the time is so tight, and often at lunchtime we could chat a little bit, but mostly we watch previous episodes. Um, and and I would say the real um, key creative, person is our director of photography, Jonathan Yap. Wonderful, wonderful DP.
Yeah.
He does every show, so we depend on him very much to be the kind of consistent
That
uh,
glue.
of the look of the whole movie.
Got
And
it.
and Jonathan works, I would say on average, one of the 2 weekend days, Jonathan and Rocco, my first AD, and I would go out on the set by ourselves and plan the whole next week of shooting. We'd walk into the location, decide where the camera's going to be. John figures out where he's going to be able to light from, um, and what props and equipment we're going to need and roughly how much time it might take. So we get a lot of work done on that day where there's nobody else around. So then
Yeah.
when we're shooting, you know, we don't have to go through all of that again. Each of us knows, and can tell our team what to do.
Mhm. Like a dress rehearsal, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you've shot 4 episodes there now. You've shot a few movies. Do you have a favorite location to shoot?
It's I would say there are some that I have just become favorites because I've loved the scenes that we've shot there.
Yeah.
Um, in the first two episodes, very much of the story was about Hanukkah, um, um, her parents,
Mhm.
coming to visit, and I loved both of those two actors
Yeah.
a lot. They were wonderful, Paris Jefferson and Peter Cockett. And so and they spent a lot of time in Maggie's apothecary.
Got it.
It's very challenging to shoot in. There's no walls that we can fly, so we're really,
You're tight.
a good location. You should be able to fly a wall away, and people can back off and go long lens, and you can breathe, but can't do any of that there.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge, and John loves to be able to see some of the street life, so it even restricts us to shoot more towards the windows. But in the first season, um, there was a sequence we shot there um, where they think they've discovered gold in the
Yes,
apothecary,
underneath the floor, right?
underneath the floor, and we dug, we broke open the floor and we dug a deep hole, and we had so much fun, just laughter and fun shooting with those three characters in that
Uh-huh.
little space. And we laughed. I just remember we laughed so much, just waiting for things to happen. But
Uh-huh.
there's something about that location that that I love, just for the fun we had there.
Do you have to get permission when you decide to break open the floor?
We definitely, talked to the producers, and we had to go back and look at the drawings for what was in fact under there before we got the floor open. And so, yes, there was some research went into it, but in the end, we decided we would do it, and it was a lot of fun.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you've shared that you face challenges with working with the animals, with the children, even the weather. Are there any other challenges that you face working at this particular location?
I'd say the big one was obviously uh, uh, yeah, working with the animals. But at that first, the sequence where we introduce Chris Russell, um, where he jumps off the
Mhm.
balcony, and rescues a child from getting hitting by the old Model
Yeah,
T.
yeah,
Uh, that was a real challenge, that whole sequence, because it involved, stunt coordinator, a stunt actor, stunt children who had to be
yeah.
rescued, the car moving. That was a very stressful day and long day. It took a lot of time, and the sun kept moving, so we had to keep adjusting the lighting
Mm,
and all the characters play. So everybody had to be covered. So I can't remember how many hours, but it took almost half our day. And meanwhile, the light is changing over that time. And in the middle of all this, our wonderful actor, oh my gosh, the owner of the hotel, Ronnie,
yeah,
is supposedly doesn't see any of it. He's
yeah.
completely so just all the angles we needed to get, and how many, the building, this kind of huge tower of boxes for the stunt double to jump into
Uh-huh.
from that level. And then to have Chris land, jump from a much lower level to land and
Yeah,
race out, and just, the car go in behind him. So, that I would say was the most challenging of the scenes and took the longest time. But in the end, I think almost all our main characters were in it.
yeah.
So, yeah, it was a challenging day for everyone.
It played out really well. We all need to go back and watch it like 15 or 20 times just so we can really appreciate all the work that went
Yeah,
into
all
it,
the work
right?
that went into it, exactly.
So we're always curious to know, with that set, which it's beautiful. It's so amazing that you guys have that location to film on. But we're always curious what's real and what's just a facade. So what are some of the buildings that you can actually shoot in that are not just a facade?
Well, Ronnie's Hotel,
Okay.
number one is we shoot obviously the exterior all the time, but the dining room, the front desk, the stairs go up. There's even a bedroom up on that level. So that building gets used a lot.
Okay.
A couple of the movies, the one with Danica, we shot there. Obviously changing, moving the desk to a different place to make it look different and stuff. But I would say that that one is probably one of, if not the most used one of them.
Okay.
Um, we had wonderful scenes in the RCMP station between Ronnie and
Yes.
that was a lot of fun.
Good.
That I know that segues into something we'll talk about, but they were so much fun to work with together.
Hmm.
Um, and since it was, Christopher's first season, just watching him play with Ronnie, trying not to laugh. We're all always trying to laugh when Ronnie is on camera. And but their scenes together were I loved. They were so much fun. The school gets used, but the interior is usually used for other locations,
Okay.
interiors that we might need, but we I don't think we've ever shown it as a school. That's certainly what
Inside, right. Okay.
inside.
Yeah.
But we use that interior because it's quite large for a
Yeah.
number of other scenes. Um, and the general store as well. That's one
Okay.
we shoot inside and out. So
Okay.
those I would say are the four main ones. I think next season, if we hopefully that we have, um, the bakery
Which is being remodeled right
which is
now.
being remodeled, and we're hoping if hopefully next season that the bakery will move back inside.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
and
the house is a full house, right?
the house is a full house, exactly. There are rooms upstairs. The orphanage bedrooms are up there. Um, and the, kitchen, living room, all that's all fully that's a real house. Occasionally the bedrooms upstairs get used for different things. And the other one that there I the Tessa's ranch house.
Oh, yeah.
We don't use the inside of it. I suspect one day they will add to it, but they haven't yet. But the little barn across from it is used inside and out.
Okay.
And then I don't know if it's episodes 3 and 4, but certainly 5 and 6, there's that new building that they've built away down on the other side of Tessa's ranch. That was a new build, and they were building that while we were shooting, my first block. They were
Got it.
far enough away, and they would,
Uh-huh.
if they were making too much noise, we'd have to make them stop.
So far enough away, how big is the actual property that you guys can shoot on?
I wish I could tell you what the acreage is, but I would say from the parking lot, if you walked a straight line, it would be about a mile, but it's kind of a dog leg.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
you can see obviously the orphanage from the town and vice versa. And
Uh-huh.
from the orphanage, you can see, um, um, the Tessa's ranch.
Got it.
And then, but then you can't see over the hill. And then from Tessa's ranch, you can see all the way down to the Lawrence Ranch. So there are times, I guess, when I think we always try to avoid showing that there's any connection between the three. So we
Hmm.
want to give a sense of a much bigger
They're
scale.
spread out. Yeah.
But it's a beautiful property. It reminds me of an area where I grew up in northern New
Mm.
Brunswick. beautiful rolling hills and rock and the trees that change color through the course of the season. I just love being on that location, and often on the weekend I would just drive out on my own and hang about and plan for the next week, but just enjoy being on that very magical piece of land.
Got to be great to go to, right? And if you're going to
Hmm.
work, why not work there?
Exactly. I feel privileged every day I'm on that set.
That's awesome. So I did a little digging to see, some of the things that projects you've been involved in. And did you have an opportunity before When Hope Calls to work with John McLaren? Um, he was in Christmas on Windmill Way, right?
Yes, he was. And
Okay.
and he was in a couple of films that I shot with him in Ottawa,
Okay.
um, Hallmark type films. So John, I think based on when we were casting for the um, um,
New Sam.
new Sam, his name came up right away. I loved working with John, and thankfully, the network loved him as well. So it was great that I was really happy to see him cast. Um, and who was the others?
How about Cindy? Did you get to work with Cindy on Heartland?
Yes, Cindy, we worked on Heartlight. She had to remind me because it was quite a while ago, but she was a young, yeah, I think it was season one, and that goes Heartland, has been going a long time. So,
Yeah.
so I was, she reminded me, so I was really happy to see. And she's such a wonderful actor and person to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, th that was wonderful.
And then I think, did you do a Christmas movie also with Trevor Donovan?
Yes, Trevor, and oh my goodness, yes, we did a Christmas movie, um, and we shot on the site as well. That's the one where the windmill one.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, and so we transformed it quite a bit, but yes, we shot on the property.
So you had, because you directed episodes 1 and 2, you were a part of that transition from characters that were kind of exiting the show and then these new characters coming in. Can you talk a little bit about the direction that you gave those new characters to come in to kind of ease that transition?
Um, I they both obviously had watched previous episodes. They both came in so prepared, um, and wonderful to work with. I would say, that part was really easy. And it was Chris I'd never worked with, but I know we did some of the early scenes, um, early on, and I could tell right away Chris was going to be, was wonderful.
Yeah.
So I thought they fit in so well. Morgan was so welcoming, and she had to really act, not being sure of Cindy's character, and
Yeah.
she had to kind of only really really warm up to her at the end, like she was worried that she was trying to steal Maggie's boyfriend and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So they're just both wonderful actors, and I'll really look forward to working with both of them again if the series goes
That's
again.
great.
They're just good people, good actors.
That's fantastic. You've shared in this podcast that you're really big on wanting to, focus in on that character development when you direct, but you've also shared about your love for just being on that set and the location and how pretty it is, the beauty of it. So, how do you balance, like, when you're directing, that time of focusing really on that character development versus just letting the scenery and that space tell the story?
Um, it's obviously it's a balance, and right from the script stage, I would say we're looking to make sure that we're not going to stay stuck inside, the jail or any interior location, but then to try to move scenes outside to the street where you can breathe. So a lot of it is goes right back to the writing. And Alfonso is very aware of that, right, from the script stage. And if anything, jumps out, that's something I'm always looking for as well, to if we're inside, try to make the next scene outside. If, and if we're tight, filming close-ups and very dramatic, intense scenes, then look for opportunities to just, have a wide shot, take a breath, get a different feeling, a different space. So it's something we're always, I think, between Alfonso and myself and Jonathan, the DP and the AD, we're always looking to make sure that we're never stuck in any one place too long, and we're never stuck inside too long. The landscape is so beautiful. We really want to make it a big part of the show.
Absolutely. Yeah, take advantage of it.
Hmm.
One of the opening scenes of the season is Lillian writing to Grace to kind of, bring us as an audience back to where we are in the story. And going back and watching it again, we hear her voiceover, but there's so many moments that are kind of like inserted in to kind of tell that story visually. So, what's that planning look like when you're thinking about, I've got this script and what that letter to Grace is going to look like and the components that we're going to build into that to tell that story?
Um, that kept changing throughout prep, because notes would go back and forth between Alfonso and the network, and a lot was riding on how do we bring the audience that's been away for 2 years, how do we bring them back? So I tried to not stay out of it, but allow them
Hmm.
to, this is their series, and
Yeah.
it's Alfonso's, baby. And so I tried to be helpful, but very and certainly work with the actors to that their expression would mirror what was being written, but what was being written as the voiceover kept, changing, and you know as time went on, as we got closer to shooting, to make sure that we covered all the bases that need to be covered. So I would say I I I I didn't interfere with Alfonso and what the content was going to be to tell all that backstory,
Hmm.
but then try to work with the actors so that at least their face reflected what they were writing.
Got
So
it.
that was a real team effort for sure.
It sounds like it. Yeah. Also, the stagecoach in that first episode, as it comes into town, and I was rewatching that again the other night, and I, not the director that I am, or the the amateur speaking here. I would call it like, as the camera's moving, it's just kind of sweeping with that carriage as it comes in until it lands on a couple of characters. In other words, it's not these like cut shots. And it went on for quite a while, and I noticed that that's something that you like to do. Can you talk about those choices to do those type of camera shots like
Well,
that?
yeah, I mean, obviously a moving camera is more interesting than a static camera. And it was kind of wonderful to come off of, I think Morgan had just come out with two of the children.
Yes,
And as they step out, they turn, and so the camera just kept, I think it stopped a little, but then it panned as the stagecoach was coming around the corner. And
it.
then we carried it right to where it stopped in front of the hotel. So we definitely, you know, did a number of takes to get that right, but it was such a big moment. And right away too, you have the characters getting off the stagecoach, and Lillian, meeting, my goodness, the housekeeper who was coming,
Oh, Eleanor. Yeah.
Eleanor, yes,
Yeah.
greeting Eleanor, and then Maggie's there to greet her parents. So just trying to keep everybody moving, and the
Hmm.
baggage coming off, and the chaos, and in the middle of that, we don't purposely don't see her, but um, Cindy
Yeah, Nora's
gets
hiding
out
around the
but on
corner.
a, we know that on the other side of the door,
Hmm.
there are two doors on both sides. So somehow she got out, tried to avoid all those people, and ends up hiding behind a corner. So we wanted to create kind of the excitement of the new arrival and introducing all these new characters. And we got two of our new children, our new orphans, and we're meeting Maggie's parents, and so there's a lot going on. But then we then cut to Cindy, hiding, and then that's where the drama really begins, that we know something is up and but we don't know what.
Got
But
it.
whenever we can, yeah, use
Yeah.
um, either the old Model Ts or horses galloping or stagecoach moving, because a lot of it is static, and so whenever we can move the camera, we've got to take advantage of it.
You shared a little bit earlier about Mountie Fletcher jumping off of the balcony and the amount of work that went into that. Would you say that was your most challenging thing to shoot in those first two episodes?
Yeah, yes, it was because we knew it would take a lot of time. It involved almost every actor at some point in the scene, and we had to shoot it from so many different angles because Ronnie's the only guy who doesn't see
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
yet, and we've got to make show it that he doesn't see it. So I would say that was probably the most challenging scene of all of them, for sure.
Which is really funny that Ronnie is the one that is not seeing that, but yet the character Ronnie really prides himself in knowing everything that is going on in Brookfield, right?
Exactly, exactly. Yes, no, he's and he's so he's so much fun to work with. Um, so and even when the camera's not running, he's talking and he's very funny man.
There
So
you
we're
go.
we're we're laughing both as we're shooting and even when we're not shooting.
Well, talk
Yeah.
about Ronnie and Michael and those moments where, because they had quite a bit of interaction. It was fun to see. You got to be that person kind of to develop what that relationship between those two was going to look like. So, talk about shooting those scenes with those two.
It was pretty easy because the scenes are well written, and Ronnie especially has been, was in the first
Mm.
season. Neil and I worked together many times over the years. I often have to say action and then look away because I'll start laughing. He's very funny. And Chris had, we in a way could find the humor in it, but he's not trying to be funny, and that was the challenge
Yeah.
of him being funny, but clearly not trying to be funny. So it was delicate balance. Took there were occasionally it took a little time, but I really enjoyed those scenes of them working together, and and I love the scene where at one point he's walking and Ronnie is just finding out who he is, and he and
He
um,
and Ben hide
yes,
where they
they
hide.
hide behind it, and he stops without looking at them, like he knows they're there. That scene was, again, we had so much fun shooting that, and it's quite a funny scene.
I think is that the scene when I talked with Chris, he's is that the scene? I think he said it was his first scene to shoot. Is that one?
It
There
might
was
that
even some like the wind blowing the hat off, the Mountie hat off, and
Oh gosh, yes. Yes, it that made, I can't remember now on our schedule whether it was, but that may well have been the
yeah.
first one. And he did it beautifully. Uh, and yeah, and the guys in the background were very funny.
You've talked about the challenges that come with having the children involved, and yet they're such an integral part to the story. After shooting those first couple of episodes, and can you share anything? Was there anything you looking back on it, you go like that scene with those children was just very rewarding for me?
the scene where the challenges with the filly,
Mhm.
um, and um, my goodness,
Philly and
um,
Charlotte.
and Charlotte, yes, fine. Um, the scene seemed very simple, but it was a challenge to keep the filly there
Hmm.
and have her hear it and them find it together. Um, and I guess watching, how I guess this segues into something we were going to talk about as well, but how Cindy and how her character and Charlotte,
Hmm.
bond through
Yeah.
the episode.
Yeah.
Um,
What
yeah,
types of discussions? Because I know, like for us, with the orphan story is such a big part of this show, and knowing that Lillian is going to be leaving and Nora is going to be coming in, and we need to quickly, understand that that care is now being translated over to Nora. So, what type of direction and conversations did you guys have about how to make that, feel right and that Nora could just kind of like slide right into that role?
right. Well, certainly it was in the writing. Alfonso, tracked that, I think, really, really well.
Hmm.
That how Cindy's character just kind of gets she's invited to stay over, but um, and Morgan is not particularly happy to her character to really see her at that point.
Yeah.
Um, but just how she that first scene where Charlotte asks her to braid her hair,
Oh, yeah.
and that's kind of brings her out a little bit, and it's her first contact with one
Mm.
of the children, and then it kind of then she's invited to stay. So then where's she going to stay? Well, there was a bunk in the room. And so it
Mhm.
was, Alfonso tracked it very carefully that it was very gradual. And even Lillian's um, attitude towards her is, she's careful, first of all, who she'd be leaving the children with, but
Yeah.
also who is this woman? Why did she take so long to reach out
Mhm.
as her aunt? What is she doing talking to Maggie's boyfriend? So just
Yeah.
negotiating how they slowly bond and come together, and the journey that Charlotte, um, and Cindy, that they have together, is really what convinces her
Yeah.
that, when she asks, can she stay
Mm.
with the kids, that Morgan feels comfortable. So that was a important to just track
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
story really carefully, and not, get ahead of ourselves and not
Mhm.
make it so obvious that that's going to be what happens.
Yeah. Well, and something as simple as like we know Nora comes into town and she's a lawyer, but something as simple as her offering to braid Charlotte's hair is just a little bit of a hint that she can be a caretaker and is not this rigid lawyer without feeling that she does have that side to her.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
You shared that it was challenging and you didn't quite know how the schedules were going to work out when you were writing the exit, when you were directing the exit of Lillian and Gabe. And so when you got word that they weren't going to be there at the same time, what did that planning look like and directing that to actually make it look like they were there together leaving?
Well, obviously a huge amount dependent on the weather. Um, and thankfully, Morgan and RJ had, worked that whole season together.
Yeah.
So they could make, be talking to that double
Yeah.
who was on a horse, or the double that's her in the
Yeah.
carriage.
Yeah.
But they intimately had worked, together for that whole season, were wonderful together. So they didn't miss a beat in that way. You believe they were looking at each other. They act so well together. Um, yeah, the challenge was more the technical, just how much the outside would change just in that 2.5 to 3 week period.
Oh,
The
yeah.
colors on the leaves were changing,
Wow.
on the trees.
Mm,
So there were a lot of, and hiding when
hmm
it was challenging when she steps out of the stagecoach.
hmm
That, we debated
hmm
how much of that to show because that really was challenging. But
hmm
we finally found, with the right wardrobe, and we did in post, we had to change the hair color a little bit to make it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
we hope in the end it looks like it's her, it's her getting out and they're together. We
Yeah.
hope the audience believes they're together, but they
I
aren't.
saw a lot of comments on social media that people were like, no, they were there together. And people were like, no, go back and watch. There's never a moment where you see them. And so there was I mean, you guys pulled it off because
Yeah.
many people
Well,
thought
and
that they
I
were
give
together.
them, I give the actors the credit because the expressions on their faces
Yeah.
told the whole story that they were looking at, the person that loved them, and that,
Yeah.
that overrode everything else. Yeah.
So as a director, you get to do a lot of collaborating with production designer, costume designer. You mentioned that in post-production, you're having conversations, as far as the editing and all of that goes. Can you talk a little bit as a director what those collaborations look like?
Um, Certainly, I have complete freedom with my director's cut. So I do, I look at all the material and try to use the best and, put it together in a certain way. And then once I've delivered my director's cut, um, I then feel I need to just back off, and stay open
Okay.
and listen to everyone. And then only, because, that's when Alfonso and the executives all start to weigh in. And I try to, and give the composer, who's got the whole series to think about, and all the other. So I try to take a step back and allow, the people whose creative job is, in post-production, to let them do their work. I will voice my opinion, but I try to take a step back and let those people do their professional job.
Got it. So, out of the four episodes that you have now directed on When Hope Calls, you mentioned the Mountie Fletcher scene. Has that been so far the most difficult scene for you to direct?
I would say, yeah, the jumping off the balcony, and so many characters involved, and trying to tell the story of everybody, because almost every main character was
Yeah.
involved at some point in
Yeah,
the scene. That was probably, yeah, one of the biggest challenges for sure.
got it. Looking back on episodes one and two, is there a particular moment from those two episodes that you're most proud of?
Um, I would say, as because I love working with the actors so much. Um, and I reviewed all the first season when I was prepping for sec. And I kept constantly being surprised at how powerful the emotional moments were near the end. There was always a moment, and I would find myself getting kind of choked up and realizing, wow, you know, and and that's in the writing. Alfonso kind of has that, and I talked to him about it. I said, I went back and looked, and I said I was surprised at how often, it really, the emotion hits me. And so I really, and so I was really aware of what those moments would be in the first, two episodes of this season. And the ones that, really resonate. for me, both funnily involved Tess Harper, um, Wendy Crewson. Um, when she sees Cindy and Charlotte, coming with the filly,
Mhm.
she's very emotional in that scene, and um, um, and I loved her performance. I lo all three of their performances in that scene, and then particularly when most of the town are out saying goodbye to Morgan, um, and um, and Tess comes and asks her to say hello,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
to
To Grace. Oh, to her son.
yes,
Yeah.
to Grace and her son.
Yeah.
And and we've seen so much kind of tension between
Yes.
them,
Yeah.
that when we see how emotional she is and how much it means to her, those moments to me are the most important moments in the series. And every episode, Alfonso has structured in such a way that one of the main actors gets a moment like that. And I think they really strike home for the audience. And those are the two that really jump to mind for me.
Those were two very powerful moments for me as well. I remember when they found Sugar and Tess's language, while she's happy to have the young filly back, it's more about she makes that comment about her son being away and makes that analogy, that connection. And then to follow it with, I picked up on it again, just like you said, when Tess and Lillian haven't had the best of relationships, but in that moment, they have that thing that connects them. And it was so powerful to me because while Tess can be so harsh, um, and it's just her personality, she knows she has to be tough. She's, running a ranch. We get to see still that soft side to her, that she
Hmm.
is, a human who cares, loves her son. So I agree with you, two both very powerful moments.
Yeah, yeah. And those, yeah, to me, and I think that's one of the objectives of every episode in the series, is to have a moment near the end like that. And so far, I think every episode has done that.
Yeah. As a director of When Hope Calls, what part of it, what element brings you the most personal satisfaction?
Um, I would say it's that same thing you just mentioned, is those moments where an audience feels and sees actors having very powerful emotional moments, which I think an audience can relate to some aspect of that in their own lives,
Mhm.
which is why I think they get emotional in reaction to it. So I
Mhm.
think um, successfully pulling off those moments is probably the my favorite and biggest challenge.
Yeah. That's they're such great moments for us as audience members, so I can understand that.
Yeah.
So crossing our fingers that there is a season three. As a director, do you have any wishes, ideas, or hopes for what could be a part of season three?
Um, I I don't. I'm not sure where it might be going, but I mean I just first of
You
all
want to be there, right?
I'd love to be there. Exactly. That's the most important thing. I want to be part of it, because um, I just love where it's shot. I love the team of people. It's been over a couple of years now. We've all worked together. I, um, I think I've communicated how much I love that location. I feel so at home
Mhm.
there. It's such a privilege to work in such a beautiful place with such good people, and heartwarming stories. So uh, for me, I really hope it goes again, and I hope I'm part of it.
Yeah. All the good things coming together. Why would you not want to be there, right?
Exactly.
Well, Don, it has been great to chat with you. We always love to get that behind the scenes perspective to help us, one, really appreciate all of the hard work that goes into your role as a director, but also to hear more about the collaboration and all of the people that have to come together to make something so special. So it's been exciting to hear from you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And we'll cross our fingers for a season 3 and that you'll be back a part of that.
I'm hoping. Thank you.
All right. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.